Hello and welcome to another ICMonitor tutorial. Today we're going to talk about capture options and how they are useful to reduce CPU and memory load on your machine. We're going to show the effect of these options on all the capture steps, go over the options and explain them, of course, and set up file rotation to demonstrate how capture options are used. The capture options are settings that affect the individual steps of the capture process. It is possible to deactivate specific capture steps using the capture options. This is done to mitigate high computing or memory requirements for demanding capture scenarios like long-term capture or capturing very high data rate protocols. The capture options can be found under the Capture tab, in the Capture Settings group, in the Capture Options dialog. Here, we can deactivate all the individual steps of the capture process for both file and live capture. This is done in an effort to reduce computing time and allow you to deal, in the example of live capture, with high data rate protocols. You could deactivate triggers and filters if you don't need them, even export handlers, and have a lot more computing power available to process incoming telegrams. For file capture, this can be very useful when loading very large capture files. You could, for example, remove filters and export handlers and just leave triggers in there to split up the capture files. If computing power is not the issue, but you're reaching the limits of your machine's memory, you can reduce memory usage for live and file capture as well. There are several presets that you can choose from. On the normal setting, we just have regular operations, nothing is done to reduce memory consumption. If we switch to reduce, captured telegrams are immediately discarded and will therefore no longer be visible in the telegram list. You also won't see them in the oscilloscope view, but they can be saved during capture in one or more capture files and make them available for subsequent analysis. For long-term recordings, trigger and filter settings are commonly used in an attempt to keep the number of telegrams in the capture low in the first place. If this still is not enough, we can set memory level to minimum. If this option is selected, measures are taken at various levels of the ICMonitor during the captures to ensure that memory consumption does not increase permanently. As a consequence, some of the views are deactivated because the data is just not there for them. For example, entries in the diagnosis trace won't be visible and other protocol-specific views. You can set memory usage levels for both file and live capture, and sometimes you have to in combination with file settings. Most commonly, the memory usage is adjusted for live capture, though there are use cases where we also need it for file capture. For example, if we want to load a very large capture file that just doesn't fit in our machine's memory, we could reduce file capture memory usage to minimum and use trigger conditions to split up the file into smaller, more manageable files. As mentioned in the capture file tutorial, the setting minimum is necessary for some of the file capture options. Let's take a look. Here we have two options. One is file rotation, where the ICMonitor will only keep a certain number of files during the capture, and the other one is when you compress your files to delete the uncompressed captures. Now we need to set the memory usage to minimum in these cases, because the ICMonitor will delete files, and telegram references for various views are set to the telegrams in the capture files. So if we delete the files from underneath the monitor, it'll lose the references, and thus those views won't work. So let's test this out and configure file rotation. We'll go to our options and reduce memory usage for live capture to minimum. We'll then configure a storage location for our capture files. In this case, just a temporary path. and of course a file name. Now we can specify how large our files should be. I'll go for the minimum so I can easily demonstrate it. We need to check we want multiple capture files. And now we only want to keep, let's say, 2 files. We apply the settings, pick an interface, and start the capture. We'll now be warned that we have capture settings, and the option Keep Number of Capture Files requires our settings to be minimum, and thus we can't see anything. Here we'll be informed of our capture settings. So we'll close this, and now all the views are disabled because we have set our IC monitor to minimum memory usage. We'll see the number of discarded telegrams go up because none of them get stored, but we'll see our PCAP file is steadily growing. So let's fast forward this a little bit until we are close to getting 3 files. So here we are. We have one file with 1 megabyte and another approaching the megabyte. And if we now look at the name, we'll always have a timestamp when this file was created. So let's create a little bit more traffic. And there we go. We now have 2 capture files and a third one being created. Now let's give this a little more time and see what happens. And here we are, approaching our third file finishing. Monitor guarantees us we'll have 2 files, so those 2 finished files will stay. But once we approach that 1 megabyte mark, we now lost the third file, as you can see by the modified date stamps here. And we still have our 2 files, meaning the last 2 files of the capture. Now let's go ahead and do this one more time. And here we are. We should now see the timestamps being switched out once we reach that 1 megabyte mark. And as you can see, here's the latest and here's the one previous. So the IC monitor will keep rotating. We can now go back to it and stop the capture. Now let's go to our options, reset all the settings, and load that file that we just captured. And as we can see here, we have now all the contents in the files, and we can use all the views we want and perform our analysis the way we need to. I hope this gave you some ideas how you can optimize for long-term capture, even if your PC seems to reach its resource limits. Thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next IC Monitor tutorial.